It's boring, painfully boring, in the way only a university convocation can be. A procession of black gowns. A brass band fumbling through. Pomp and circumstance. A podium flanked by flags. It's somewhere in small-town America, sometime in the late 70s or early 80s, judging by the hairstyles and the wood paneling. You hear the announcer's voice. And now, President Harrow will address the graduating class of... The tape warps. The audio drops into a deep, metallic hum that doesn't sound like any kind of feedback you've ever heard. The picture bends. For half a second, the entire frame smears sideways, like someone grabbed the image and dragged it across the screen. When it snaps back, something's wrong. There are gaps in the crowd. Rows that were full a moment ago now have empty chairs, scattered like missing teeth in a smile. The students at the end of the row are suddenly sitting next to no one. No one reacts. No one looks surprised. The band keeps playing, just slightly out of tune. You rewind. You frame by frame through the distortion. The people don't stand up. They don't walk away. They don't duck. They're simply there in one frame and gone in the next. The hum gets louder. A few students on stage put their hands to their heads like they're hearing something else, somewhere else. One of them opens his mouth as if to scream, but the sound never comes. The audio cuts to a pure, high-pitched tone that clips the meters and shatters the speakers. Then, black. 40 seconds of corrupted tape. That's all we have of what some corners of the internet now call the convocation that never happened. A ceremony that, according to official records, did not exist. At a college that, according to the US government, never existed. Recorded on a tape no one knows how to authenticate. From a day hundreds, maybe thousands, of people swear they remember, and yet can't find a single newspaper article about. And here's the part that really starts to mess with people. If this was an ordinary hoax, it should have died in a week. Instead, over the last 15 years, this one boring convocation video has turned into something much bigger. A rabbit hole that pulls in government archives, erased campuses, sealed grant files, and even the way our memories work. So how does a simple American convocation, the most forgettable ritual in our civic religion, become one of the strangest, most persistent mysteries in the story of America? And what if the real twist is that the mystery might not be about the tape at all? If you've never heard of the Larkspur Convocation, don't feel left out. It's not a Netflix documentary. It's not a Wikipedia page. It's not even a good Reddit tofu. It's more like internet folklore. A stitched-together legend built from a 2-minute VHS clip, some scattered documents, and a whole lot of people who are uncomfortably sure they remember something everyone tells them never happened. And that's important, because what we're talking about in this video lives in that weird gray area between verifiable fact, government record, and the way human beings think they remember reality. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to walk you through the story the way it actually emerged online. First, the tape, the footage that started it all. Then, the search for the campus that doesn't seem to exist. Then, the declassified documents that connect this sleepy convocation to Cold War mind control research. And finally, the part nobody likes to talk about. What this mystery reveals about us, right now, in a country where we're no longer sure we trust our own eyes. Each chapter opens up a new question, and yeah, we're going to chase the wild theories, but every time, we'll drag it back to what we can actually know. Because in a story like this, the difference between unsolved mystery and weaponized myth really matters. So let's start where the internet met this thing. With one username, one upload, and 40 seconds of tape that should not exist. Chapter 1. The tape that shouldn't exist. Why does this tape exist at all? And what makes people think it's anything more than a clever fake? The Larkspur Convocation enters history, or folklore, on a Thursday night in March 2010. On a now-dead message board for vintage broadcast junkies, a user named JuneBug93 posts a thread titled, "Found this in my dad's stuff. Anyone know what station this is?" No wild claims. No cursed tape vibes. Just 3 grainy screenshots. A wooden podium, a banner that reads, Larkspur State College, 1979 Convocation, and a room full of students and parents. Underneath, a file, convocation2_master.mpg. The first people who click it are exactly who you'd expect, A/V nerds, analog archivists. The kinds of people who can tell you what model of camera shot a commercial, just from the way the whites bloom. For the first minute and a half, it's everything you'd expect. A local TV news-style opening, VHS noise, a lower third graphic that says, Live, Larkspur State, Annual Spring Convocation. A man in his 60s, President HEW, droning through a speech about opportunity and the American dream. Cutaways to an audience that looks aggressively normal. The first weird detail doesn't jump out at anybody. It only shows up when someone scrubs back later, frame by frame, in 60 frames per second. There's a banner on the wall that reads, Class of 1979. But the cheering in the lower third, just above it, says, Larkspur State College Commencement 1981. That's a continuity error no real TV station would ever let slide. People in the thread start calling it out. Is it a glitch? A bad edit? A fan project? Then, at 1:47, the video rips sideways. We already saw it in the cold open. The warping, the metallic hum, the frozen half scream on that student's face. For the AV nerds, though, the horror isn't the disappearances. It's the quality of the error. One of them posts, I've restored hundreds of old tapes. Dropouts, tracking errors, head switching noise, bad TVCs. This doesn't look like any of those. It looks digital. Like someone is simulating analog error. In 2010, deepfakes aren't a thing yet. Analog horror, as a genre, barely exists. So when people notice the chairs going empty between one frame and another, they don't scream, Hey Archie! Or, Lore! Or, this is literally a YouTube series. They do something more dangerous. They start trying to prove it's real. The first wave of analysis is exactly what you'd expect from the early 2010s internet. Zoom and enhance on faces to see if anyone recognizes a parent or a professor. Frame analysis of the clothing to date the fashions. Audio spectrograms of the metallic hum to see if there's hidden Morse code or subliminal messaging. A pattern emerges. The suits and dresses fit late 70s/early 80s. The microphones and cameras in the background look like late 70s Sony and RCA hardware. The wood paneling, the cheap ceiling tiles, the heavy velvet curtains. Nobody can quite identify the room, but if you went to a mid-tier state college in that era, it feels right. Then someone asks the obvious question. If this aired live, why has nobody ever seen this clip before? This is where the first open loop appears, and where this stops being just creepy footage. Because when people go looking for Larkspur State College, they don't just fail to find the convocation. They fail to find the college at all. What the tape gives us is not just spooky imagery. It gives us keywords. Larkspur State College, President HEW, Spring Convocation 1979 or 1981. Names, dates, places. The kinds of things you should be able to plug into Google and get something. Instead, search results come back empty. And this is 2010, not the Dark Ages. The U.S. Department of Education database of accredited institutions is online. The Library of Congress catalogs are online. Old newspaper archives are getting digitized. But there's no Larkspur State College. No Larkspur State University. No alumni associations. No old football rosters. No mentions of President Harrow in any educational context. Nothing. Either this is a very, very elaborate fake, down to the microphones and the haircuts, or somebody went to a lot of trouble to erase an entire college from the public internet. Which leads to the next, bigger question. Chapter 2, the college that isn't there. How do you erase a college from American history? And if you can't, why does Larkspur State keep showing up in places it shouldn't? The search jumps forums. From that obscure broadcast board, it leaks onto 4chan's, then Reddit / unresolved mysteries, then into YouTube compilations with titles like Top 10 Broadcasts That Shouldn't Exist. Most people treat it like a creepy oddity and move on. But there's always that one guy who doesn't let it go. In this case, it's a user who calls himself Archivist_H. He's older. He talks about card catalogs and microfiche like they're old friends. And he posts something that, in hindsight, is the moment this crosses into a bigger mystery. You won't find Larkspur State online, but if it existed, it left a paper trail. He drives to his local library. Not the new one with the coffee shop. The downtown one with the busted elevator and the basement that smells like wet cardboard. He starts pulling city directories from the 1960s, 70s, 80s. Phone books. State education reports. Old college guides. After a couple days, he posts scans. A 1975 Guide to Public Institutions of Higher Education in the Commonwealth. Listing. Larkspur State College. Larkspur, KY. Enrollment. 2,830. Founded 1938. A 1977 Yellow Pages entry under Colleges and Universities. Larkspur State College. Admin Office 606-555-3174. If you were around before the internet, you know, phone books don't lie. Nobody forges a Yellow Pages line for fun. It's too boring. Other people join in. Someone in Kentucky pulls property tax maps. There is a town called Larkspur, a tiny one, wedged between two larger cities. It barely shows up on modern GPS, but it's in the old atlas. Someone else digs through microfilm local papers. They find a 1968 article about Larkspur State College choir to perform at regional festival. A 1972 story. Larkspur State announces new science building, names Dr. Edwin Harrow president. There's nothing about a convocation disaster. Nothing about disappearances. Just the usual small-town college stuff. Until 1980. Then, the paper trail stops. No more sports scores. No more Dean's List announcements. No more faculty obits. Nothing. For a while, the working theory is simple. Larkspur State College existed, then got renamed, merged, or shut down. That stuff happens all the time. There are hundreds of former colleges whose names you only see on boomer resumes. So people look for what replaced it. Within a couple weeks, a user finds a lead, a campus called Larkspur Regional University. That appears in 1983 state reports. Same town, same address range, similar enrollment. On paper, it looks like a rebrand. But the weirdness is in the timing. 1979, last confirmed mention of Larkspur State College. 1980 to 82, nothing. 1983, Larkspur Regional University. Appears as if it's always been there. That 3-year gap catches people's attention. It's like watching someone try to fix a typo in history with whiteout. The correction is neat, but you can still see the smear underneath. Then comes the first real human face in the story. A commenter on an early YouTube breakdown username. ePrice70 posts. My diploma says Larkspur State College. But when I requested my transcript in 2004, it came from Larkspur Regional University. They told me it was just an administrative update. This is the kind of detail hoaxers almost never bother with. E. Price starts answering questions. She says she was a first-gen student, that she lived in a brutalist concrete dorm called North Hall, that everyone nicknamed the bunker, that the convocation hall in the tape looks like the old Founders Auditorium, except the banner never said convocation. In her time, it always said commencement. And then someone asks the only question that matters. Were you there the day of that convocation? E. Price hesitates. She says her memory of graduation is foggy. She remembers the weather. Hot, humid Kentucky May. She remembers her mother complaining that the chairs were uncomfortable. She remembers the college president making a joke about the air conditioning being broken. But when it comes to anything weird, she goes blank. I don't remember any hum. No lights flickering. No panic. It was just a day. But when I watched the tape, I got this awful feeling, like I was remembering a nightmare I'd forgotten. This is the first time in the story you feel the ground shift. Up until now, it's been possible to treat the whole thing as an elaborate fake, a performance, an ARG, a viral attempt. But hoaxes are bad at weaving themselves into the private, boring details of strangers' lives. Here we have paper records that say Larkspur State College existed, a successor institution that seems to override its name, a real person whose diploma says one thing and whose transcript says another, and a convocation video that appears to take place in a building she recognizes on a day she can't fully remember. The more people dig, the clearer one thing becomes. Larkspur State College was real. The erasure isn't total, but it's messy. The college's name changes. Its archives are incomplete. Its alumni records seem to have been normalized to a new institutional identity. So now the mystery splits. On one side, the tape itself. Is it raw footage, edited footage, or an outright fabrication grafted onto a real campus? On the other, the historical blackout. Why is there a 3-year gap in the public record? Why does every FOIA request about Larkspur's late 70s research grants come back with whole pages blacked out? Because that's the next layer people find. The money. And this is where weird tape starts to intersect with Cold War America. Chapter 3. The Mandela Convocation. Why do thousands of people remember a convocation disaster that never appeared in any newspaper? And what does that have to do with America's favorite internet ghost, the Mandela Effect? If you spent any time in the weirder corners of TikTok or Reddit, you probably run into the Mandela Effect. The quick version. It's named after people swearing Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s, despite him very publicly not doing that. It covers everything from how we remember the Berenstain Bears being spelled Berenstein to movie lines nobody ever actually said. Most psychologists will tell you it's not evidence of parallel universes. It's a mix of misremembered details, social reinforcement, and the way our brains are wired to store the story of events, not the literal frames. But the feeling, when you hit one that trips you up, is unsettling. Like the floor shifting under your mental furniture. The Larkspur Convocation slides into this space almost perfectly. Around 2016, multiple threads pop up with titles like, "Does anyone else remember watching a graduation collapse on live TV in the late 70s? Or, "Graduation incident in Kentucky? Thought I imagined it until I saw this." Over and over, the pattern is, someone stumbles across the tape. They get that. I've seen this before. Chill. They swear they remember news coverage of a graduation gone wrong. Not a mass disappearance. Not a sci-fi scenario. More mundane, but still dark. A structural collapse in a convocation hall. A gas leak that caused dozens to faint. A stampede during an evacuation. One woman describes being a teenager in Ohio, watching the evening news and seeing footage of students being wheeled out on gurneys from a college somewhere down south. Her dad turned the TV off and said something like, "Turn that off, you don't need to see that." For decades, she assumes it was some forgotten tragedy, the way everyone knows about Kent State, but not necessarily about, say, the 1908 Lakeview school disaster. Then she sees Larkspur, and the room, the stage, the banners. They feel close enough to trigger whatever that old neural pathway is. Except, there's still no record. No archived AP Wire story. No local paper headlines in 1979 or 1981 about convocation calamity at Larkspur. No obituaries clustered around a specific May weekend. If something catastrophic happened, it left nothing in the public record, which is vanishingly unlikely in the age of microfilm and insurance companies. The more grounded explanation is harsher, but simpler. People are misremembering. They're blending real coverage of other college tragedies, real anxiety about public gatherings, and the emotional punch of the Larkspur tape itself once they've seen it. Their brains then backfill a story. I must have seen this before. But here's where the story loops back into why this matters for America right now. Because this is exactly the same brain space that modern propaganda, disinformation, and conspiracy theories exploit. See the vague, emotionally sticky story. A graduation where something terrible happened, but they covered it up. Add a piece of visual media that almost fits, with just enough ambiguity. Let people's own memories, fears, and biases do the rest of the work. Some people go full multiverse. Larkspur is proof we jumped timelines. Others go full conspiracy. Of course, there's no record. That just proves the cover-up. But underneath all of that, there's a quieter, more universal reaction you see in the comments. If they wanted to, could someone erase a small tragedy like this from the record? How many things have we almost forgotten and only remember because someone's dad kept a tape? What the Larkspur Convocation gives us, more than anything, is a mirror. It shows us how badly we want to feel like there are coherent, sinister authors behind the chaos of history. How uncomfortable we are with the idea that our own memories are not reliable witnesses. And how easy it is, in a media-saturated, archive-saturated society, to assume that anything which isn't easily searchable must have been deliberately buried. Is there a real-world core here? A grubby little government research program? An institutional rebrand? Some ethically dubious experiments on unsuspecting students? Probably. We have documents that point to that. But the greatest mystery part? That comes from the way a single piece of ambiguous media plugged itself into our national anxieties about mind control, government secrecy, lost time, and the feeling that the official version of America's story is leaving something important out. Which brings us to the question everybody asks at this point. Chapter 5. So what really happened at Larkspur? If you had to put money on one version of this story, is Larkspur a genuine suppressed event, a polished hoax, or something even stranger, a myth we built ourselves out of scraps? When you strip away the creepypasta and the TikTok edits, you're left with three main theories. Let's walk through them in the same order most researchers do. Theory 1. It's all a hoax. In this version, someone with access to old broadcast camera gear and good editing software in the late 2000s creates a fake convocation video from scratch. They pick a plausible-sounding college name, Larkspur State, and a plausible date. They simulate analog noise, splice in fake lower thirds, and create vanishing students frame by frame. Junebug 93 is either the original hoaxer or an unknowing middleman. in favor of this. The disappearance effect does look digitally composited to a lot of pros. There's no hard evidence tying the exact visuals of the tape to any one documented event. Internet culture has only gotten better at doing this sort of thing. Working against it. To sell a deep hoax like this, you need supporting evidence. Most hoaxers do that with made-up documents, websites, fake yearbooks. The Larkspur case is weird because the paper evidence points towards something real. Real phone book entries. Real state education reports. Real DARPA grant records, obtained via FOIA, that mention Larkspur by name. For this theory to hold, you either have to believe the hoaxer also forged or planted multiple independent government documents across decades, or they got incredibly lucky and happened to latch onto the one semi-erased American college whose history already looked suspicious. Hard, not impossible, but you can see why people keep digging. Theory 2. Real college, real experiment, exaggerated consequences. This is the messy middle theory that a lot of the more sober researchers end up with. In this version, Larkspur State College was a small, underfunded regional college that took federal money in the 70s to study mass media effects. This is literally documented. At least one convocation was used as a live test bed for audiovisual entrainment. The test caused some unexpected or unethical outcomes, maybe severe anxiety attacks, maybe a crowd panic, maybe health issues for a small number of people. To manage liability and bad press, the college and its state overseers quietly restructured it into Larkspur Regional University, cleaning up the brand. The incident, if reported at all, got memory hold like 1,000 other small-town tragedies. Decades later, someone close to the project, or someone with access to a tape, leaks or loses a copy. A third party, wanting to amplify the story, edits the tape to include explicit disappearances, making it far more viral, but also far less credible as literal evidence. In favor of this, it matches how institutions actually behave. No grand conspiracy, just shame, CYA, and rebrands. It fits the fragmented records. There's enough bureaucratic weirdness to suggest something went off script, but not enough to scream mass casualty event. It explains why the tape feels right to so many people who went to small colleges in that era. Working against it, it still leans heavily on interpretation of redacted documents. There's no smoking gun memo saying, "Our convocation experiment freaked everyone out." It rests on the assumption that somebody deliberately edited the tape to make it supernatural, which we can't prove without finding the original source. But in terms of what actually happened in our timeline, this is the least magical, most bureaucratically believable option. Theory 3. Full conspiracy. The convocation catastrophe. This is the version that shows up in the more breathless YouTube videos. Larkspur ran or hosted a high-intensity mass suggestion experiment on its student body. Something went catastrophically wrong. People died or suffered permanent psychological damage. The government swooped in, seized tapes, locked down the town, and retroactively scrubbed every mention from the press. A single tape survived. We're seeing the edge of a horror that's been successfully buried, a true American mass disappearance. Look, history gives us a few examples of ugly government experiments. The Tuskegee syphilis study, the radiation experiments on unwitting hospital patients. MKUltras dosed unwitting citizens. So a big part of why this theory is sticky is emotional. We know institutions are capable of doing horrible things and covering them up. But there are some problems. Large-scale tragedies generate paperwork, insurance claims, lawsuits, death certificates, survivor accounts, even the most covered-up scandals. Tuskegee, MKUltra, eventually left smoking guns because too many people were involved for too long. In Larkspur's case, despite the best efforts of internet sleuths, no one's turned up. A cluster of deaths tied to the college that year. A class action suit mentioning a convocation. Even a single alumni blog post saying, "Hey, remember that time graduation turned into a living nightmare?" Could those have been fake too? Maybe. But at some point, the number of missing pieces makes the theory less likely, not more. So where do I land? If you force me to bet, here's my stack. 80%. A real, mostly forgotten government-funded research project at Larkspur involving televised events, with low to mid-level ethical sketchiness and a large helping of bureaucratic incompetence. 15%. An artistically ambitious, technically skilled hoaxer piggybacking on that real history to craft a viral analog horror object. 5%. Something genuinely extraordinary that we may never fully reconstruct because the evidence got scattered, shredded, or taped over by a sitcom rerun in 1987. But that 5%? That's where myths live. And that's the part that keeps people coming back. So is this really the greatest mystery in the history of America? If we're talking body counts or geopolitical impact, obviously not. JFK's assassination. 9/11. The identity of the Zodiac Killer. Those are bigger in the conventional sense.